Hey there, welcome back, or if it's your first time here, I'm so glad you stopped by. Tonight, I've got something special for you. It's not just a love story. It's the kind of story that slips under your skin and stays there. A story about two people who were never supposed to meet, and absolutely forbidden to fall in love. But they did. And the world around them, it wasn't ready. So grab a blanket, get cozy, and let us begin. Westford was the kind of town that looked peaceful on the outside. White picket fences, wraparound porches, and American flags swaying gently in the breeze. It had charm, sure, but behind every smile was a whisper, and behind every welcome mat, a line you weren't supposed to cross. Sophia had come here from Monterrey, Mexico, carrying nothing but a worn suitcase, a temporary work visa, and a heart full of hope. She worked at a small bakery on the corner, waking up at 4 a.m. to knead dough, mop floors, and pour coffee for customers who rarely remembered her name. She lived alone in a cramped apartment above the shop. No family, no safety net, just a constant sense of caution that followed her everywhere. In Westford, she wasn't Sophia. She was the girl from the bakery, the immigrant. And for many, that label was enough to keep their distance. Then there was him, William Harper, the heir to a family name more tightly woven into Westford's history than the bricks of City Hall, where his father sat as mayor. His family's legacy was engraved on library plaques, etched into the marble of old bank buildings, and stitched into every charity gala invitation. William had grown up with everything most people could only dream of: elite private schools, summers abroad, luxury cars, and a guaranteed position at the family law firm. But privilege came with a price, a pristine image to uphold, a fiancé chosen by expectation, and a future mapped out before he ever had a say in it. He had never met anyone like Sophia. And she had never believed someone like William could truly see her, really see her, in a world that had always looked the other way. They lived in the same town, but in two entirely different worlds. One was full of wine glasses and crystal chandeliers. The other, silent dinners after long shifts, eaten alone by the window under the yellow flicker of a street lamp. Then on a snowy morning, when the bakery door jingled open and William stepped in, shaking off the cold, the rules began to melt. It was a Thursday when their worlds collided, two completely different lives, drifting silently toward each other in the midst of Westford's sleepy streets. The smell of fresh tortillas, coffee brewing, and sizzling bacon filled the air as Sophia wiped down the counter of El Sol Café. The small, unassuming Mexican diner had become her second home since she moved to this town, tucked away in the back of the industrial district, far from the bright lights and fancy restaurants of the city center. She had worked at El Sol for almost 6 months now, doing everything from serving coffee to scrubbing pots and pans. She had learned to stay under the radar, quiet, efficient, polite. That was the safest way to live in a place where people like her weren't always welcome. She was a worker, an outsider, and the last thing she needed was to stand out. But on that morning, everything felt a little different. When the door to the cafe opened, the usual rush of cold air followed by the sound of the bell was accompanied by the unmistakable presence of someone who clearly didn't belong in this humble space. Sophia glanced up, and there he was, tall, wearing a dark coat and a look that screamed wealth and power. He had the polished air of someone accustomed to boardrooms, not small-town diners. He didn't quite fit the place, yet he was here, standing in front of her. "Coffee?" Sophia asked, trying to keep her voice steady. He hesitated, his eyes scanning the menu on the wall above her head. "Just black," he replied, his voice low, a little hesitant, as if he wasn't sure what he was doing here either. His presence felt odd, out of place, But Sophia didn't let that show. She poured the coffee into a chipped mug, the steam rising in front of her face. She handed it to him with a soft smile, though inside, she wondered what had brought a man like him to a little cafe in a town like this. He took the cup, his fingers brushing hers for the briefest of moments. It wasn't tea much, but something about it lingered. She caught his eyes for just a second before he looked away, his face unreadable. "I've never seen you here before," she remarked, trying to make conversation. "I'm not usually around this part of town," he admitted, offering a small, almost awkward smile. "I'm William. William Harper." The name clicked in her mind. Harper, the family who practically owned the town, with their mansions on the hill and their influence in every corner of local government. He was the son of the mayor. Sophia simply nodded. "Sophia," she said, her accent thick but clear. They exchanged a few more pleasantries, then he sat at the window, the same spot he had chosen the last time he visited. She didn't think much of it, but the more she noticed him, the more curious she became. He wasn't like the other regulars, who would chat about their kids, their jobs, their lives. He was quieter, more reserved, yet there was something in the way he carried himself that made her wonder what he was really like beneath that polished exterior. The next time he came in, it was the same story: his coffee, a quiet hello, a polite exchange. But this time, he stayed longer. He didn't rush off after finishing his drink. He lingered, looking out the window at the falling leaves, lost in thought. She found herself watching him when he wasn't looking, intrigued by the way he seemed to be carrying the weight of something far heavier than she could understand. A few weeks passed, and they began to cross paths more often. Sophia didn't know why she kept looking for him, why her heart would race just a little when she saw him walking toward the cafe. Maybe it was the way he always ordered the same thing, always sat in the same spot, as if he needed the familiarity of this place, even though it wasn't his world. Then one day, as she brought him his usual coffee, he surprised her. "You really get it, don't you?" he said suddenly, his voice almost too quiet for her to hear over the hum of the cafe. "How it feels to just belong to something." But not quite. Sophia blinked, caught off guard. "What do you mean?" "I don't know," he replied, frowning slightly. "You work here every day. You probably don't have the luxury of just being. I guess it's hard to explain. I've never really met anyone who seemed to understand what it's like to just keep your head down, get by, and not be noticed." Her chest tightened. He didn't just see her. He understood her. There was no judgment in his words, no pity, just recognition. It was the first time anyone had said anything like that, and it left her speechless. "I know exactly what you mean," she said after a long pause, her voice soft. "I came here to work. I didn't expect anything more. Just a job, a way to survive." That was when it started, the slow, quiet unraveling of something neither of them had been ready for. From that day on, their conversations grew deeper, less superficial. They talked about their lives, their struggles, their dreams, and their frustrations. It wasn't love, not yet. But there was something undeniable between them. However, despite the growing bond, they knew they couldn't be open about it. The difference in their social positions was too vast. William had a future planned by his family, one that didn't include people like Sophia. And Sophia, she was always walking a fine line. Any misstep could mean losing everything. So, they kept meeting in the shadows, quiet corners of the town. Late afternoons when the cafe was empty. hidden moments in a world that didn't understand them. They had to pretend they were just two strangers, nothing more, nothing less. But with every stolen moment, the truth was becoming harder to ignore. They were no longer just two people passing through each other's lives. They were something more. It all started with a simple glance. The kind of look that could be dismissed if they weren't already hiding so much. Sophia hadn't expected it to unravel this quickly. She'd spent the past few months building a careful wall around the small moments she shared with William, quiet walks in the park, whispered conversations, stolen touches. But that day, she had slipped. She had let her guard down. It was a late afternoon at El Sol Café, and William had come in for his usual coffee. But this time, there was something different in his eyes. A restlessness, a tension. He hadn't been in the cafe for a few days, and when he sat down, his eyes darted around the room, as if expecting someone to walk in at any moment. Sophia set the coffee down in front of him, their fingers brushing. But she noticed the way his eyes were glued to the door, the way his posture tensed when a car drove by, and the way he finally looked at her with a silent apology. "I think they know," he whispered, his voice barely audible. She frowned. "Who?" "My parents," he said, his gaze shifting to the window. "Someone saw us together. And they're not happy." Sophia felt a coldness in her chest. The weight of his words settled between them like a storm cloud. "What are you saying? Who saw us?" "I don't know," he murmured, shaking his head. "But they're not going to let this go." The next morning, the storm hit. It was a Saturday, and Sophia had just finished her shift when her phone rang. She glanced at the screen. Private number. She hesitated before answering, her heart already pounding. "Sophia," a familiar voice barked through the line. It was Mr. Harper, William's father, the mayor of Westford. His tone was cold, like a winter frost. "I suggest you stay away from my son." The words were direct, but the implication was clear. She had no place in their world. He went on, his voice becoming more venomous. "You're an immigrant. A nobody. You think you can just walk into my town and disrupt everything my family has worked for. You think my son has the luxury of choosing someone like you." Sophia's throat tightened, and for a moment, she couldn't speak. She had expected opposition, but not this venomous attack. "There are consequences for this, you know," he continued. "We'll make sure you're dealt with. I can have your visa revoked. I can have you deported. Or worse. Don't think you're untouchable just because you've worked in some cafe." The line went dead. For the first time in months, Sophia felt utterly powerless. The weight of her fear was crushing, suffocating. But she couldn't tell William. She couldn't let him know that the people who were supposed to protect him were the same ones threatening everything she had worked for. William didn't know about the call. But the tension in the air was undeniable. He knew something was wrong. He could see it in her eyes, the way she flinched when he touched her. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice filled with helplessness. "I never meant for this to happen. I never thought it would go this far." The more he tried to apologize, the more it felt like he was admitting he had no power to stop his family's wrath. He was trapped, caught between his love for Sophia and the suffocating expectations of his family. But it wasn't just his family that turned against them. The town itself began to buzz with rumors, whispers in the streets, glares from shop owners. It wasn't long before people began to openly snub Sophia, to avoid her presence, to treat her like an outsider, a threat. One afternoon, as she walked down the street, A group of local women stopped and glared at her. One of them, Marlene, the owner of the local dress shop, spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "Don't think you're fooling anyone," Marlene sneered. "You don't belong here. And neither does he, with someone like you." Sophia clenched her fists, fighting back the tears. The isolation, the hostility, it was suffocating. And then there was Rachel, a woman William's family had arranged for him to marry. Rachel had grown up with the Harpers, and her father had deep ties to the town's political scene. She was everything William was expected to want: rich, well-bred, and perfectly positioned to help maintain his family's influence. Rachel made no effort to hide her disdain for Sophia. She had been watching from the sidelines, waiting for the right moment to swoop in and reclaim what she believed was rightfully hers. "You really think you're special?" Rachel had confronted Sophia one day when they crossed paths in the supermarket. "You're nothing. Just a poor immigrant who thinks she can climb into my world. You will never fit in. You will never be enough for him." Sophia stood there, feeling small and powerless. But she refused to back down. She looked Rachel in the eyes and said, "You don't know anything about me." Rachel smirked, walking away. "Enjoy it while you can. It won't last." The weight of everything William's family, the community, Rachel began to break her. And though she loved him, though she had never felt this way about anyone before, she wasn't sure how much longer she could endure it. Her world had been turned upside down. The man she loved was stuck between two worlds: his family's expectations and his own desires. And now, the very town they had called home was pushing them both away. The air in Westford had never felt so suffocating. It was as if every street corner, every room in every house, was charged with the weight of what was about to happen. Sophia felt it in her bones, the tension building like the crackle of an impending storm. She knew what was at stake, not just her future, but William's as well. The pressure from his family had reached its peak. William's father had threatened everything: his career, his family's wealth, the power they held in this town. They had done everything to tear them apart, throwing every obstacle in their way. But Sophia refused to let it end like this. She refused to be driven out of town, or worse, forced to disappear quietly into the shadows as if she had never mattered. They had fought in small ways, sneaking glances in public, sending secret messages when no one was looking, meeting in hidden spots. But now, the stakes were higher. Now, the world was watching. William sat at the kitchen table of his family's estate, his face etched with the weight of a decision he could no longer ignore. His mother's voice still echoed in his head, reminding him that a marriage to someone of Sophia's status would ruin everything they had worked for. "You don't understand, William," she had said, her voice trembling with emotion. "This is our future. This is your future." But as he sat there now, looking out at the sprawling estate he had grown up in, he realized something. He didn't want it. He didn't want the wealth, the power, the status. All of it felt hollow without Sophia by his side. The phone rang, a sharp, intrusive sound that broke him from his thoughts. He picked it up. "William," his father's voice boomed, cold and calculating. "This is your last chance. You will cut ties with her. You will end this foolishness, or I will make sure you never inherit a single dime. I will strip you of everything you hold dear." William stood up, the phone pressed to his ear, his hand trembling. He had heard these threats before, but this time was different. This time, something inside him snapped. "Enough," he said, his voice steady, but filled with determination. "I'm not doing it. I want tea." For a long moment, There was silence on the other end of the line. Then his father's voice, low and dangerous, came back. "You'll regret this. You'll lose everything." "I already have," William replied. "I don't want it anymore." He hung up the phone, and for the first time in weeks, he felt like he could breathe. He had made his choice. There would be no going back. Meanwhile, Sophia stood in the kitchen of her small apartment, her hands trembling as she prepared dinner. She had always found comfort in cooking, in the quiet rhythm of chopping vegetables, stirring pots, and listening to the hum of the world outside. But tonight, everything felt different. Tonight, she knew something had to change. She had heard the rumors, the whispers that spread like wildfire through the town, the stares, the cold shoulders, and Rachel, the woman William's parents had chosen for him, had never been settled. Sophia could feel her eyes on her every time they crossed paths, could hear the spite in her voice whenever she spoke of the poor immigrant who had stolen William's heart. But Sophia had never been one to back down. She had fought for everything she had: her home, her place in this country, her independence. And she wasn't going to let a family's outdated ideals or a town's prejudice dictate her future. She finished making dinner, her hands steady now. And then she did something she hadn't done in months. She picked up the phone and called William. "I'm done hiding, William," she said, her voice filled with quiet resolve. "We can't keep living like this. We have to fight. We have to show them that what we have is real." He was silent for a moment, but when he spoke, his voice was filled with a kind of urgency she hadn't heard before. "You're right. We can't live in the shadows anymore. I'm ready to fight." They both knew that this was it. The point of no return. The moment they would either stand up for their love or let it slip away. The next morning, they met in the town square. It was early, before the streets were crowded, before anyone could stop them. They walked toward each other with a sense of purpose, their eyes locked, and for the first time in weeks, they felt the weight of their decision lift off their shoulders. "Are you sure?" William asked, his voice full of tenderness, yet filled with the courage he had found deep inside himself. "I'm sure," Sophia replied. "We can't let them tear us apart. We're stronger than they think." And so, in front of the small crowd that had gathered, friends, curious onlookers, and even some enemies, they stood together. Sophia took William's hand, her fingers intertwining with his, as if this simple act could defy all the boundaries that had been set for them. They spoke to the crowd, to the town that had once embraced them and now cast them aside. William spoke of love, not just the kind of love that was easy, but the kind that required sacrifice, the kind that demanded bravery. He spoke of the power of choice, of standing up against a world that told them who they could and couldn't be with. "I don't want to inherit my family's wealth," William said, his voice strong, unwavering. "I don't want to follow a path that isn't mine. I choose Sophia. I choose love." The murmurs in the crowd were loud, but Sophia stood tall beside him, her gaze steady. "I don't care where I come from," she said. "I care about where we're going. And I'm not afraid to stand by his side." There were gasps from some of the onlookers, but they stood their ground. They were no longer hiding. They were no longer afraid. William had chosen. Sophia had chosen. And together, they would show the world that love was more powerful than any title, any wealth, or any prejudice. They had fought for their love, and now they would live for it. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting a soft, golden glow over Westford. The town that had once felt so suffocating now seemed like a place filled with hope. It wasn't perfect, but it was home, a home that Sophia and William had fought for, Together, their journey had not been easy. They had endured the whispers, the glares, and the threats. They had faced the fierce resistance of William's family, the isolation from friends who had turned their backs, and the judgment of a town that couldn't see past its own prejudices. But through it all, they had clung to each other, drawing strength from the love they shared. It had taken time, but eventually, the walls that had once separated them from the world began to crumble. It was gradual, like the thawing of ice after a long, harsh winter, but it happened. And it happened because their love was real. And real love had the power to move mountains. William's decision to stand by Sophia had shaken the foundation of his family's world. At first, they had tried to salvage what they could, offering him money, connections, and promises of a future without her. But with each rejection, William grew stronger. He had refused to be swayed by their wealth, their power, their expectations. He was no longer the obedient son they had once known. He was a man in love. Sophia, too, had found strength in the face of adversity. She had always known what it felt like to fight for what she wanted, to survive in a world that often looked down on people like her. But with William beside her, she felt as if she could face anything. Together, they had built a life, brick by brick, a life that was theirs alone. It wasn't long before their love began to change the town. Slowly, the people of Westford began to see the depth of their commitment. They saw William's courage and Sophia's unwavering loyalty. And they saw something else, too, a love that was pure and unshakable, something that even the most entrenched prejudices couldn't destroy. It was an old woman in the town square, Mrs. Willoughby, who spoke up first. She had known both William's family and Sophia for years. She had seen the way William's eyes lit up when he talked about Sophia, the way Sophia had smiled through the pain of being judged. Mrs. Willoughby had lived long enough to know that love didn't come with labels or expectations. It simply was. "I've seen a lot in my day," Mrs. Willoughby had said, her voice trembling with emotion as she spoke to a group of the town's elders. "But I've never seen anything as pure as what those two have. If we can't accept that, then what are we even doing here?" Her words had started a ripple, one that grew with each passing day. William's family had begun to soften, too. His mother, once so bitter and angry, had quietly reached out to Sophia, offering an apology that was long overdue. His father, though proud and stubborn, had begun to see the joy in his son's eyes when he was with her. It wasn't the life they had planned for William, but it was a life that he had chosen, one he had earned. And so, after months of struggle, of fighting for their place in the world, they were finally able to embrace the future they had dreamed of. William and Sophia had a small wedding, a quiet, intimate ceremony held in a garden just outside town. It was nothing grand, nothing extravagant, but it was perfect. The day was warm, the sky clear, and the sun shone down on them like a blessing. Sophia wore a simple white dress, one that she had bought with the little money she had saved up, and William stood beside her, looking at her as if she were the only thing that mattered. They exchanged vows, their voices trembling with emotion, but filled with certainty. "I choose you," William said, his eyes locked with hers. "Every day, for the rest of my life." Sophia smiled through her tears. "And I choose you," she whispered, her hand gently resting on his. "Always." The ceremony was small, with only a handful of their closest friends present. There was no lavish reception, no grandiose display of wealth. Just love, pure, unfiltered love, and the quiet joy of knowing they had made it through the storm together. As the sun set that evening, casting a warm glow over their new life, they stood hand in hand, looking out at the world before them. It was a new beginning. Over time, the town of Westford began to change. The old prejudices that had once defined it slowly began to erode. Sophia and William's love had sparked something deeper than just acceptance. It had created understanding. And as more people saw the strength of their bond, more people embraced the idea that love could come in many forms, that it didn't have to be dictated by family expectations or societal norms. It wasn't perfect. There would still be struggles, still be moments of doubt. But together, Sophia and William had learned something invaluable. They had learned that true happiness wasn't found in titles or wealth, but in the love they shared, the love they had fought for. And with that, they had everything they needed to face whatever came next. And so, Sophia and William's love story unfolds, one that teaches us the power of resilience, the strength of love in the face of adversity, and the courage it takes to stand up against societal expectations. Despite the obstacles they faced, prejudices, family pressures, and societal judgment, they never gave up on each other. Their story reminds us that love is not bound by social class, family status, or cultural barriers. It is something pure, something worth fighting for. As they walked into their future together, hand in hand, they proved that love can conquer all, no matter how hard the world may push back. Their journey wasn't easy, but the happiness they found was worth every sacrifice, every struggle. It shows us that with determination, support, and the strength of true love, we can overcome even the most insurmountable odds. What do you think? Do you believe love can truly conquer all obstacles? How far would you go for the person you love? Can you relate to Sophia and William's struggle for acceptance in love if their story moved you? If you believe in the power of love to change lives, don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let us keep the conversation going. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories to life. Hit the bell icon to stay updated on all new episodes, and thank you for being part of our community. Remember, no matter what barriers you face, love is always worth the fight. Stay strong, stay hopeful, and never stop believing in love.